welcome to episode 223 of the Ben Briggs podcast. I am Ben Briggs. It is Tuesday, people. Tuesday let's get rid of that fucking fly. Tuesday the 22nd of June, 2021. Slick as fuck start there, people, wasn't it? Slick as fuck. Let's have a bit of tea. There we go. I can see this episode already deteriorating into chaos. I hope you're doing well, people out there. How are you doing? If you're watching the Euros, I hope you're enjoying it. I personally am still watching all the games. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The rest of it looks like England are going to progress, so that's all right. He says, you never know, people, you never know. On the subject of football this week, soccer, as you say in America, because you have your own brand of football out there, don't you? Hey? Always have to try and better us, don't you? Hey, the old Americans. I'm only fucking around. You got your own handball game, haven't you? Football, where you know, it's not really. It's more. It's a bastardisation of rugby, isn't it? Which in itself is a bastardisation of soccer, or football, as we call it over here. I never really like calling it soccer. Not that there's anything wrong with the Americanization of it. I realise you have to divide between American football and football, as we would call it over here, soccer, or association football. That's where it comes from, isn't it? The little rule book here, you're finding out information here. The little rule book that went over to America, I don't know. There was probably a copy, you know, in the library of the Mayflower, perhaps. But yeah, that's where it comes from, isn't it? Association football, like, was on the thing, so they shortened it to soccer. But yeah, they're in the world of football, and this is women's football in America. Which is quite, I think in America, by all accounts, football has always seemed has been seen as a bit of a pussy's game. You know what I mean? Not the genitalia. Well, yeah, I know, like, American soccer has quite a lot of money in it in the women's game. I think not as much as, like, obviously over in Europe with the men's game and stuff like that, but I think it is quite popular out there. Not that I've ever been to see any games when I've been out there, which is something I should do. I haven't even been to see a woman's game over here. I've watched them on telly and stuff, but that is something, as a white, privileged, skinhead, cisgendered, fucking straight, white, cisgendered male, I ought to tick that off. That ought to be on my list to be ticked off. So if anyone comes back to me and calls me sexist, I can just get out 2 tickets stubs for a woman's football game, and just I think I'd win that argument. There you go. Have you been to a woman's football game? Oh, you're a female footballer. Okay, I'll lose that. That'd be my fucking luck. Look at me being all woke with my 2 tickets. Yeah, I was actually playing in that game. Thank you for recognising me. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, Japanese soccer player Yokoyama comes out as transgender. Now, this is the flip side of transgenderness. Is that? Can I get away with saying that? Transgenderness, the transgender community within sport. So, Japanese soccer player Kumi Yokoyama said they are transgender. They're taking the the they them thing. Pronouns. A revelation praised in the US, where they play in the National Women's Soccer League, but an identity not legally recognised in Japan. Really? Is it illegal to be transgender? Is it illegal to be transgender in Japan? In 2003, a law was passed allowing transgender people to change their gender marker on legal documents. Approval requires being over 22 years old, unmarried, undergoing sex reassignment surgery, sterilisation. Fucking hell. Brutal out there, aren't they? And having no children under 20. LGBT rights in Japan. Let's have a look. Oh, God. You never want to click on Wikipedia, do you? Too much information. I just want it broken down for a fucking soundbite. Japan's abusive transgender legal recognition process. Right, here we go. Let's have a look. I wouldn't have thought, I've never been to Japan. I know of people who have been to Japan, but I wouldn't think they're, just maybe from what you know from society, which is mainly based on World War II films, I ain't going to lie. That's all I know about Japan, really. I've gleaned all of my information from Japan from the film Pearl Harbor, and may I say this? Their planning is impeccable. It doesn't look as though they're particularly enlightened over in Japan. I'm not talking about the general population. I'm just talking about their laws within that. I'm sure there is, people who are a little bit more forward thinking, as there are in every country. We have our own laws in this country that, people didn't agree with, gay marriage and that sort of thing, and and even the church didn't for a long time, did they? Until they realised they can make some fucking money out of it, and they're being left behind. The 27-year-old, here we go, 27-year-old forward for the Washington Spirit, there we go, any Washington Spirit fans listening, said they felt more comfortable with their own gender identity while living in the United States. I imagine it's a lot easier there, where teammates and friends are more open to gender and sexual diversity. I'm coming out now. I'm coming out. Yokoyama said in a video talk on former teammate Yuki Nagasato's YouTube channel. In the future, I want to quit soccer and live as a man. There we go, people. It's not many athletes. Usually, the big headlines, isn't it? Maybe this is the thing that transgender people will have to fight against more in the future. Not that they don't now. If anything, particularly male to female, they're the ones that always seem to get the headlines in the sports, aren't they? They're the ones. Is that slightly condescending saying that? I don't know. But they're the ones. They're the stories. Jesus, fucking minefield. This is, isn't it? I feel, talking about this at the minute, I feel like Indiana Jones. Where he's stepping across like that bit where like he has to tread on the stones and not in between, or go in between the stones and not tread on the stones and stuff like that, or the fucking arrows start firing across at him. I feel like that right now. Why do you feel like that, Ben? Is it your inbuilt prejudice, is it? Possibly. I don't know. Let's have a bit of tea. Welcome to the last episode of the Ben Briggs podcast. So yeah, it's usually like male to female athletes who are involved in sports, isn't it? That make the headlines. So this is the opposite of that. So I imagine in the future I want to quit soccer and live as a man. So I imagine she's going to quit. She. I said, I know. It's new. They want to. They're going to quit soccer first and then live as a man, because obviously if they're transitioning, I don't think that they would be able to. I've never said they so many times in a sentence as I did just then. But they wouldn't be able to play in the female soccer league, National Women's Soccer League, surely. Does that go for even if they're transitioning, even if they identify as a man now? Or are they going to go, okay, I've got a horrific injury, my knee's gone, I've done my cruciate. I might as well live as a man now. Is that it? Because surely they wouldn't be able to live as a man and play in the National Women's Soccer League unless they transfer to the National Soccer League men's. If they could make it into the team there, would they? No, I'm not saying they wouldn't. But that would be interesting. Because would it have the same? Here's my logic behind this. Would that have the same headlines as a male to female transgender playing in women's sports? If a female to male, say I imagine she's a good footballer because she's playing in that league anyway. But imagine if she then joined. Jesus, it's a fucking minefield, isn't it? If they then. Why are you talking about more than one person, Ben? I know. It's confusing to me. It's not that confusing, really. That's what they want. They want to be known as. But imagine they then left the women's league, joined a male team. Do you think it would? It's interesting. It would be interesting to see if it would, elicit the same sort of uproar as somebody who does a male to female, who does. Fucking hell, this is a minefield. Who is a male to female transgender, like going into like women's sport. It would be quite interesting to see that, or whether they genuinely have to see out their playing days in a female sport and then transition. It's interesting. I know I've been a bit around the houses there, hey man, it's just like you never. This is the first case of this that I've come across. In the future, I want to quit soccer and live as a man. So as soon as she that's an interesting thing as well, isn't it? If you're living as a man, is she going by the pronouns they and them now, and not he and him, because she's not transitioned yet, and then she'd change her pronouns to he and him, or because if surely there's no reason, or does the they and them differentiate her from a cisgendered man, and she'll keep those pronouns? That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Is it they and them in a transition period, and then he and him, or I suppose it's whatever they want it to be, isn't it? If they want to be they and them forever, they can be they and them forever. But it just seems, if you're living as a man, you would what? surely you'd want to reinforce that, wouldn't you, with the he and him thing? Like, if you were transitioning to be a woman, part of the thing... I'm talking from my own views here. If I wanted to live as... Hey, man, if I wanted to live as a woman, right, and I thought, right, I've always felt I'm a woman and that sort of thing, wouldn't it reinforce it more being called she and her rather than they and them? Obviously, unless she's sort of like non-binary, which the they and them thing like works for that, doesn't it? I don't know. Obviously, they can be called whatever they want to be called, but personally, if I ever transitioned, and I'm not saying that's not off the cards, people. I don't know. Not to make light of this, obviously, like people go through a lot of like shit, don't they? But about it. But I think if I believed I was a woman, I was born in the wrong body. I would want the reinforcement of the she and her thing, I think. Definitely. I would want people to call out into me in the street and say, she's a cunt. Dear. I'm coming out now. Anyway, this has been praised by President Joe Biden, by the way. He's not going to fucking condemn it, is he? You know what I mean? He's not going to go, this is fucking disgraceful. Not that it is disgraceful, but to Carl Nassib and Kumi Yokoyama. Carl Nassib was the American footballer, wasn't he, that came out as gay. Which must have been tough, I imagine. He's the only playing player at the moment, isn't it? Isn't he? That has come out as gay. Because it's a very fucking. If there's one sport that's very testosterone-y, heavy, sort of like, fucking lads, man, I fucking love fucking women and spreading my seed. I don't know. I imagine that's what they say a lot at American football games. Jesus. I mean, so actually it's got on the article here about support and awareness of gender and sexual diversity has slowly grown in Japan, but LGBTQ people lack many legal protections and often suffer discrimination, causing many to hide their sexual identities. Here we go. We've got the meat and two veg, I was about to say. Jesus. It's fucking tightrope this, isn't it? An equality law pushed by rights groups was scrapped recently due to opposition from the Conservative ruling party. Oh, right, okay. So this is where we get into the meat of it. No pun intended. Transgender people in Japan also must have their reproductive organs removed to have their gender recognised on official documents. Fuck me, man. I know there's a lot that, a lot of people have that, have gender reassignment surgery, don't they? But it's nice to have the fucking choice, whether you want it or not. A requirement that human rights and medical groups criticise as inhumane and unnecessary and should end. Fucking hell, yeah. So if you want the official documents of your gender changed in Japan, you've either, you've got to either lose the pipe or gain a pipe, haven't you? Yokoyama said they weren't enthusiastic about coming out, but it was a choice made while thinking about the future, and it would be harder to live closeted. I would not have come out in Japan, they said. They thanked their teammates, friends, and girlfriend for their support and courage. There you go. You see? Maybe, it's so strange, isn't it? You know, when you read stuff like that about other cultures and other countries and things like that, and you think, you know, in the Western sort of like, you know, Europe and like the UK here and UK and America, you become a little bit sort of like blinkered, don't you? You think everybody and everyone around the world. I know there's, third world countries and things like that. You look at that and you go, oh, that's fucking terrible. Like another, they're fucking the way they live and that sort of thing. But it's so far removed. But somewhere like Japan, that's like quite a technological. It's hardly a third world country, is it? I don't think. Japan, first. Is it a first world country? Examples of first world countries, and yeah, it's a first world country. It's quite highly technical, isn't it? You always think of Japanese people as quite polite, and obviously, as long as you're not fucking fighting a war against them and get captured, but. You always think, they're quite a polite, civilized society, don't you? Forward thinking because they're quite, technologically advanced. And you sort of like get blinkered to that really a little bit when you live in sort of like our sort of like, our sort of culture, like in the UK and America and Europe. But there's even European countries where it's like a little bit, some of the old Eastern Bloc countries and, stuff like that. It's still a bit dodge out there. I wouldn't be getting any transfers to the Polish League or anywhere like that. I'll have you know, LGBT rights. Let's cover our ass on that, shall we? LGBTQ rights, Poland. I'm not going to Google every other country, but I'm just interested. Poland provides LGBT people with the same rights as heterosexuals in certain areas. Gay and bisexual men are allowed to donate blood. Oh, that's nice of them. Gays and bisexuals are allowed to serve openly in the Polish armed forces, and transgender people are allowed to change their legal gender following certain requirements. Oh yeah, what are they then? Let's not go into that. That's a fucking minefield. Jesus. Don't get too much involved in that. Usually, it's quite an interesting case though, because usually it's like the ones that hit the headlines, the news stories about transgender athletes that always hit the headlines are the ones like that Laurel Hubbard, who's the weightlifter, and I don't know what their whether her he or well, it's definitely not he. It's they are not. It's as in the pronoun. Oh, fucking hell, Jesus! You got to cover your ass, haven't you? Whether the pronouns are they or she, I can't. I can't Google everything. Hubbard is first openly challenged and Games said, I think the pronouns they use they. Yeah, the Olympic. Yeah, because they're the first. They're the first trans athlete to go in the Olympics. So you always hear stories like that because obviously. News wants to sell news, don't they? They used to want to sell newspapers. Now they want to fucking get you to their fucking website, don't they? Where you can comment and be outraged and shit like that, can't you? But this case of the Japanese soccer player is obviously female to male, so it's a flip on that usual sort of like line that people take, and it's interesting to see how the newspapers have reported this as being a more of a positive. It seems to be like the whole story about this seems to be a lot more positive than what you'd get with a male to female trans athlete, because they've almost already when it's a male to female trans athlete, they've already written that narrative arc, haven't they, of whether this is right or this is wrong. Whereas, obvious, you know, if she was trans into a man while she was playing still in the female soccer league, would that be allowed? Which is an interesting question. Sorry, I was stuttering a bit there. I was trying to transitioned into being a man. Would they still be able to play in that league? Obviously not, because they themselves probably wouldn't want to anyway, would they? But it's just interesting if she actually went and moved to a male side, then whether people would be up in arms as much as they are with a male to female athlete. I just find it interesting, the whole, you know, the whole thing, because it's like for the Olympics committee, when that Laurel Hubbard becomes the first trans athlete to compete in the Olympics. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, aren't they? Like, really, to a certain degree. They can't, but possibly legally, they can't outlaw her from competing if she's qualified and she's or they or whatever the pronoun is that they use. But they they couldn't legally stop her from competing if she's reached the level and qualified for the Olympics. But you're always going to get people going, this ain't fucking fair. It's interesting, though, that a lot of the athletes who do transition from male to female, it's and I'm not I'm not just trying to dig myself a hole here. It's very strength related events. You know what I mean? It's never the sort of like gymnastics or anything like that. It's so far anyway. But maybe that's something to do with just what those particular trans athletes have been good at. But it seems to be cycling and weightlifting, you know, which is, I know there's female weightlifters and female cyclists and things like that, but it's not the more I'm digging myself a hole here, aren't I? It's not the more sort of like flexible or traditionally sort of like, I know men do gymnastics as well, but it's not like the female gymnastics where you have to be sort of like a little bit more supple, but they're quite young anyway, aren't they, the female gymnastics? Whereas obviously the athletes coming through now who are transitioned from male to female are a little bit older, possibly because their journey has been made accessible in recent years. That's how you dig yourself out of a hole, people. Right there. I think we've done it anyway. I'm not sure. If you've got any issues about anything I've talked about today, let's find out what Laurel Hubbard pronouns. Let's have a look. She. Looking forward to privacy. Dead naming trans people like Olympian Laurel Hubbard. What was it? Yeah. Using the wrong pronouns. Yeah, that's the big debate about it as well, isn't it? Like, I think most people, like I have displayed myself in this podcast, most people just don't want to fucking trip up, do they? You know what I mean? When it comes to, because for the majority of the population, meeting and talking to trans people is a fairly new thing. I think. I know trans people have always existed and that sort of thing, but for the vast majority of people, it's a fairly new thing with the pronouns thing. The he, she, they, them, having alternatives to pronouns for people. It's a fairly recent thing. And I know there's people going to be shouting, no, it hasn't. It's always been around. Yeah, but it's never been so, pushed to the forefront as it is now. And I can say that being a 44-year-old man who's you see the progression of that. And I think most people just don't want to fucking trip up and don't want to be hounded for it if they don't do. You know what I mean? It'd be nice, because you see that and that sort of thing, and I know your identity is important to you, but most people just don't want to fucking, get fucking slaughtered just for going, fuck, sorry I fucked up or whatever. So, there we go. So, if you are annoyed by anything in the podcast and you want to hound somebody for it, you can just email me, podcast@benbriggs.co.uk. That was episode 223, people. We have talked exclusively about transgender athletes on both sides of that transition as well, which is quite interesting. I find it fucking the interesting thing I found is how both of those things are reported, where a female to male athlete and a male to female athlete seem to be reported differently, as if it's, and it seems, whereas, everyone's transition is different, man, but it just seems that it's reported differently in the press. Whether that's just those two stories or not, I have no idea. Anyway, let's cut it there before we dig ourselves a big hole. I will be back on Saturday, motherfuckers. Have a good rest of your working week, and I'll speak to you then. Take care.